Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another week of Growing with My Fellow Growers. I'm your host, Jack Greenstock, joined as always by an amazing panel. I'm going to pass it over first this week to Spartan Grown.
Nice, Jack. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, all one word, no spaces. Or you can just shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com or russ@gmlarmy.com, and I can help you with all of your lighting or growing questions.
Happy to have you back. And next up, we've got the American one.
Hello, Jack Spartan and everyone in chat. I am the American one on the YouTube and the American one underscore with underscore Akeens over on the IG. And yeah, it's good to be here.
Happy to have you back as well. And this week, I know it is the Super Bowl, so shout out to anybody who's not able to make it during the live show. I know a lot of you are currently watching the Eagles and the Chiefs face off right now. I just watched the opening kickoff and all that good stuff, but I'm more interested in being here, to be perfectly honest with you. And so tonight, I figured we could talk about a few different things. In my head, just came up with the idea of Super Bowls and SIPs, and two things that I kind of wanted to focus on were like what would be our Super Bowl to grow and then to smoke, which by a little bit deeper definition, I'll say would be like, what's your dream combination? And it has to be more than one strain. It could be, two or more. It could be four, 20, however many you want in there. But like as an example, I would say like a Super Bowl for me for daytime or like when I wake up would be a combination of some Blue Dream and some Jack Herer. And some people call it Herrera, but Herrer, Jack Herrera, whatever. Those two are great for me. And if I had to throw a third in there, I'd probably say maybe some old school sour diesel, and that would get my day started on a real positive note. And in honor of the Super Bowl, I figure, how would you start your day if you were looking for an uplifting kind of get you going? What combination of strains would you grow to then harvest, and would you do anything special with them, Spartan Grown?
Right now in my current stable, I would reach for Vortex. That's the one that's my get me up and going in the morning strain. But I'd also strains in the past and that I've got experience with. Green Crack was always a good one. And Sour Melon from Mantis Genetics from I got that cut from was it I got that
Abolish.
from Abolish Farms, but yeah, was it Sour Melon? I'm trying to think of it was the Sour Melon that was the one that was the uppity. It wasn't I was thinking it might have been his OG, but no, his OG is definitely not uppy. So yeah, it was definitely the Sour Melon from Mantis Genetics. That one was really like caffeine effect. Like it actually seriously woke you up and got you going. So at least it had that effect on me. So I'd say a mix of those three probably would be what I'd be reaching for if I could magically make them appear.
It's always nice to go back into the past, even if you don't currently still have the cut, or even if it's gone entirely. But I think anything with a little THCV in there gives me a little bit of that caffeine effect as well. Jack the Ripper, Jack's Cleaner would be another good ones on those lists, and I think Vortex definitely has been known to show traces of that in some of the testing as well. And I'll pass it over to Tao and ask if you could grow out a couple strains to have your Super Bowl of the morning. Any strains throughout the time of history, current or past and present, etc. What would they be, and maybe why? A little bit about why.
Yeah, you mentioned Jack the Ripper. I would say Pandora Box would be one of them. I had that in my stable for a while, and that one definitely doesn't knock you out. And yeah, recently I had that Ronberry by Cheesequake that I made that I grew some outside that got harvested. I would say a little bit early, and that definitely doesn't put you down. It keeps me awake at night. It seems so. Those are two that I would go to. Yeah, I don't necessarily reach for something that wakes me up in the morning though, because I like all weed, no matter what time of day it is. I'll smoke it, So yeah, I would go with anything for morning bowl works, morning Super Bowl.
And in terms of affordability, I think for most people, it's probably more affordable to actually reach for the caffeine, whether it's a, home brewed cup of coffee or espresso or going out and buying it somewhere, even at like ridiculous rates of, however much per cup. THCV is not super common or cheap to come by at this point in time. I'm sure with, you know, more cannabis being grown, it'll become commoditized and cheaper and more available. But that's certainly one that I think helps get the day started,
I think it's
as
a
well
great
as
combo too, though. I think you don't have to pick one or the other. I think both together is awesome. It's one of my favorite combos. A little bit of caffeine and cannabis at the same time. It's such a great pairing.
I'm 100% with that. And I've recently kind of gotten back into espresso, and it took me like 8 different shops to go try, you know, find a decent shot, but I finally found one locally, and I've been indulging a little bit more than I usually. I'm like a maybe 1 to 3 shots a month kind of person. Like I don't do it every day, and as I'm getting older, I don't have as much energy. Unfortunately, the reality sets in, and there's more of those days where I'm like, man, I just don't have enough energy. Like I need a little pick me up, and sometimes the cannabis that I have available is just not doing it, and I could use a little extra. Or even if the cannabis is a nice pick me up or a good focus, I think the caffeine is just a different level of motivation, a different type. Like it's not activating the cannabinoid system. Caffeine actually acts on a different excitatory, part of your body, but it's more directly related to the heart rate and things like that. But I certainly think that I mentioned this either on Nick Wolf's, I think, The Way We Grow recently, or on one of our last episodes. But I do think that caffeine helps me at least pick out more of the unique traits from one strain to another. Where if I'm just like smoking 5 OGs and I haven't had any caffeine at all, it's like really hard to parse. Like, yeah, this one's a little gassier, this one's a little more piney, this one's a little more earthy or whatever. But in terms of like the effects, they'd all kind of feel like a little bit like sedative, stimulating at the same time, but more on the heavier, relaxing side. And if you have a little caffeine, I think it helps me parse like, oh man, this one makes me a little more creative. Oh, this one makes me, appreciate food a little more or a little less. I pick out maybe notes in music a little bit more with a certain strain and things like that. Like there's really subtle notes that, especially if you are in the same setting or listening to like a lot of the same songs and you all of a sudden pick something out new. It's like you're in the same car, listening to the same album. And it's like, how have I never heard? I've listened to this for 20 years. And now all of a sudden I just heard like an ad lib in there that made me laugh. Like, I'm like, man, I never heard him say that under his breath or whatever it was. And I think caffeine and the right cannabis can help pick out little stuff like that, just make us a little bit sharper, a little more tuned in. Um, Recently, I saw a video. This is a little bit off the cannabis topic, but I do think that it has helped me focus generally. But this woman was describing like she was listening to lyrics of a song, like a few different popular songs, and they had like really dark messages, but they sound really positive. And then like as she was processing it, you could see like the look on her face change from like happy and upbeat to like, oh my God, like what the fuck were they just saying? And it's just like I think cannabis can actually help us tune in, be more present, and not have the wool kind of pulled over our eyes. I think a lot of society generally tries to, whether it's programming or brainwashing or just what is popular, what sells, sex sells, violence sells, if it bleeds, it leads kind of thing. So there's probably a lot of reasons for why artists make music about maybe the not happiest or most positive things and hide those messages. But I think cannabis, I think, is a great way to avoid some of that stuff because if we take on negativity, like be careful who you're listening to, our podcast and other ones. Like if you feel like we're taking you to a dark place or negativity or something like that, then like tune out. Like, find something that's gonna serve you better. I think we generally try to stay educational and stay on the cannabis growing topics and things like that. But everybody has to find what works for them. Occasionally, we maybe dip into the conspiracies or political side of things that can rub people the wrong way. And I try to reel us back into the growing side of things. So I'll go. A lot of people think of the paradigm indica sativa hybrid, but I sort of introduced it as like, what would you use in the morning as a pick me up? Because I think more of us are moving away from that paradigm. It could be a reference because like we know it's related to a rough group of effects that we're all kind of semi-familiar with, and it's also related to a rough group of morphology, like a sativa being the tall, thin leaf plant, right? The indica being the short, broadleaf plant. I'm not saying that that's an actual factual. I'm just saying that most of the community and society kind of acknowledges and recognizes those terms to mean those things. But moving away from it a little bit, kind of like your midday, something that's maybe not gonna make you want to scrub every corner of your house, like that caffeine effect, but also not going to make you fall asleep. So keep it on the Super Bowl topic. Is there something that you like for a midday? I know, like Tao, you said you kind of like all strains, all times of the day, but you said the one that you just harvested recently was keeping you up a little bit at night. So clearly there is certain times and places for certain ones to be used and to not be used. And the more we use it, the better we sort of understand that. But Spartan, is there any ones during the daytime that you tend to lean towards? Not quite going to bed, but also not necessarily trying to get a million things done.
Yeah, it's to answer that question, it's usually like I like to have several different strains for me to choose from for one. So that's already pretty I don't know, uppity, I guess. I don't know what you want to call that. I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be able to grow my own cannabis and have different varieties to be able to pick and choose instead of just I only have weed, so I'm going to grab the one that I have. Um, but for me, when it comes to during the daytime, I just don't want something that's going to make me tired. So it's not so much what it does to me, it's what it doesn't do to me, I guess. I notice right away which ones make me pretty tired or lethargic, and those are the ones that I avoid during the day, especially if I have to do something like leave the house. I'm not going to want to be tired and lethargic. I'm going to want to be more sharp. So, I mean, there's a lot of strains, and it's usually like on the citrus terps of things. They're the good daytime strains that never really make me tired. So that'd be like your oranges and lemons, and uh, so like super lemon haze or lemon Jeffrey or uh, clementine or tangy or all of these kind of citrusy strains tend to always have the same effect on me, and it's not a tiredness effect. So I would reach for something like that. I usually start searching for something like the fruits, or even the vortex that I have is that way too. It'd be something that I would still reach for during the day. Just something that's not going to make me tired. And honestly, if I'm looking to try to be tired, there are a few strains that do really knock me out. Donnyburger, which I just smoked a bowl of, can do that at night. Or Mac One is one that's really makes me tired. Uh, but it's not like I'll
You don't get
stop.
citrus from the Mac one?
I don't think I get citrus out of Mac One. Not, no, I don't think so. I don't know. I've got one in flower right now, so I'll let you know when I harvest it. Um,
No, you're more familiar with it than I am for sure. I've just tried a bunch of other people who've grown it, including Cap, but that said, like it expresses differently in everyone's garden, as like the grow off has shown us, and as other, grow competitions have kind of pretty directly shown. Mac one in your garden, I'm sure I would probably like your Mac one. Like if I come to Michigan, I'm definitely gonna smoke some. I'm not gonna say
yeah.
no to it. But generally, like I would say, it kind of one of the things I didn't love about it was it usually smells to me like if you've ever been into a men's bathroom, the urinal, like in like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, before they made urinal cakes that smell like Fruit Loops and stuff, like they
Yeah.
had this just like very basic, like lemony cleaner smell, but it's like that mixed with like a little bit of piss is kind of how like the Mac one
I
has
don't get
come
that. Yeah,
across.
I don't get that at all. Um, when I smell it, no. I do get like kind of maybe I might get fruit, maybe. I don't know. I'll have to open it. I'll have to get me some in the next harvest and see, really put my nose to it.
It's
But
always tough to, I think cannabis is, as I mentioned last show or others, that it can make like every smell in the rainbow, essentially from like a skunk to an orange and everything in between. But it can also make smells that like you just can't describe, like that only maybe cannabis is producing, or like a corpse flower or something. Like there's
yeah,
dead body smells coming off of like some plants, and it's like holy shit! Like I didn't think that was a possibility, but sure enough, it is. And some of them are just like it's a mix of, yeah, if you have like oranges and apples and grapefruits and mix all of those together, it's like hard to even know that it's all three of them. It's just like there's a general citrus or
yeah,
fruitiness
and I would
or
have to have them be like I would have to have them be very different in which I haven't really noticed yet, but they'd have to be very different in effect for me to keep something with the same terps. Right. So if I have something that's lemony or whatever, if I get another strain that's lemony, it's not a good thing. It's not something that's going to make me keep it unless it's more lemony, more than the one that I have, or it has a different effect than what the one that I have already has. So, that's always a factor too, in my garden. But for me, I'm more like trying to collect just like I do for when I'm making cannabis oil, and that's like I'm trying to get that wide range of cannabinoids. So what I'm doing when I'm searching too is I'm trying to find the ones that the most different from what I have, so that I can be able to cycle through all of them and be able to enjoy all those different cannabinoids and their medicinal benefits, obviously. Instead of just narrowing my focus down to one thing, like my buddy Baked in his GMO stuff. Um, I mean, that's great and all to find your one thing or whatever, but have an arsenal, man. Get a wide berth of because all of the stuff that I've looked into, all this stuff keeps pointing to, you know, a wide range of cannabinoids and other medicinal compounds instead of, a targeted approach.
It'd be kind of like with food if we were just like, I really like steak, so I'm just gonna eat steak only for the rest of my life. It's like there's gonna be some gaps in that nutritional composition. So if I'm like, I really like OG, and yeah, it helps my pain and inflammation, but it's like if I only smoke OG all the time, like you said, the things that you don't want it to do to you, like during the day, some stuff's too sedating. So if you use it during the daytime, it's either gonna make you fall asleep or like just not be as productive as you could otherwise be. And so being aware of that stuff super critical, and knowing when to use and when not to use is something that can be a hard lesson to learn for some folks.
Yeah. Durban poison. I saw someone say something about a Durban cross, but Durban poison's another great one that I love during the day. Um, that's another one that should be mentioned.
I've never had bad Durban poison in my experience. Thankfully, it's all been very good. Like the aroma, the flavor, the high. Something you mentioned that I did kind of like was talking about if there was a lemon strain and it had a different effect. Like Jack the Ripper was like a super uppity, like kind of like a heart palpitating lemon for me. But I've also come across like lemon Kush that was more lemon sedating. So you could have like your lemon upper and your lemon downer if you're like a pure lemon guy, right? If you really liked just lemon, lemon, lemon all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And even with like baked with the whole GMO side of things, like I generally like all the burgers and GMOs and things like that too. But like yourself, I also enjoy a stable of just different flavors. Like just to maybe I do want to actually like, and granted you can get flavors from eating good food and things like that, but it's like also nice to have a few different jars that smell really different. Like when I was at the Tommy Chong event, I had my strawberry daiquiri from Subcool. It was a Kyle Cushman collab, the strawberry cough crossed to Jack the Ripper. And then I had Chernobyl. And that to me, it was like a lime Slurpee, like margarita in the one. And then I had like strawberry, just pure strawberry in the other one. And just even two jars, like two different flavors was enough to like, a lot of people are out here are so exposed to like gas, earth, funk. It's pretty commonplace because OG's been on the West Coast for a long time and it's really good. And I still enjoy it, highly desired. But not many people have come across like true strawberries. Like the one guy asked me, "Did you grow this in like a strawberry field, like in strawberry soil?" Like he was just like so convinced, like I must have done something. And I'm like, no, that's just genetics, man. Like I just grew it in my regular old soil, and that's how it expressed. Like I picked the right one apparently, but a little bit of luck and really good breeding on Subcool and Kyle's part by keeping the strawberry cough around, spreading it out. But um, I once you I wish I would have held on to them because my goal ultimately, like in 20, 30, 50 years, when I do think cannabis will be so open that we can just have like a wing of your house, like an area like of mothers, like just like part of your hallway is just like 10 mother plants. Like,
Or
oh,
a
here's
tissue culture refrigerator.
there you go. That's more logical in terms of space utilization. You could just like set it up in like a small fridge or something. But I just love the idea of being able to like, I'm walking from my bedroom, going down the hall over to the bathroom or the kitchen or something, and I'm just walking past like, there's my cherry pie, there's my Jack Herr, there's my blue dream, blueberry, whatever. You just got like a swath, and you just see these big like, oh, like hey moms, like give them a little shake, like check their water, like I just I've always liked the idea of having more plants, seeing them more commonplace, just like around the house. And even with like my males that I won't um, end up using to breed, I liked how I've had hard times killing plants. So what I do is feed them to my cats. So the non-breeder males are kept in veg, aka just general sunlight around here, or enough light to prevent them from going into flower. And my cat does a pretty good job mowing them down. The male cat more so than the female, but it's funny. She tends to be picky, and like the ones she likes, I tend to like too. So it's like I think we have similar taste or something, because she'll only eat ones off of like the strains that I'm like really a big fan of, and maybe she can just tell he's giving more attention to that one. Like I gotta go mess with it.
Or maybe you smoke those strains more often and she likes the smell and it reminds her of you. She's
Well,
like, all
that's
right,
probably it.
this is my owner's smell. I can eat this one.
She's real smell sensitive. Like my one cat had to go to the vet. Her brother, they're from the same litter, same age, effectively twins or whatever. But he just smelled a little different, and she was like hissing at him for days. And, like we gave him a bath one time, same thing. Like didn't recognize the smell, and like it took a while for her to like re-accept him. And anytime I get out of the shower, she's all jumping up and snuggling on me and this and that. But uh, shout out to all the cat folks out there and dog people too, because dogs are awesome. They've got just as good as noses and great companions as well. I don't favor one or over the other. I think they're both amazing pets. So whatever works for you out there.
A fun little fun fact about Jack the Ripper I learned today. Jack the Ripper, the actual mass murderer or whatever, they DNA solved that murder and they know who it was. So I thought that was interesting. So if you guys are interested in that, run that. Go read that and you get some closure on that old ass story.
I wasn't holding my breath because it was
Yeah,
long enough
yeah.
ago that I'm like, well, I don't think he's out there still doing it. But
I know, but I swore it was the doctor and it wasn't the doctor. So that was cool.
it is cool. Honestly, I love all that. That kind of stuff is fascinating. True crime and the history of a lot of these recent things. Um, there's a lot to be learned from it. I studied psychology and definitely can say that there's a lot to be taken from it, and it can help prevent stuff like that in the future. So I'm glad that we're getting better technology, less and less bad people getting away with bad things. It's getting exposed, getting put on the internet, getting recorded on cell phones. Like they're not all bad. There's some good to it. But getting back to the Super Bowl side of things, I know Tal, you were talking about like kind of anything, any time of day. But what's your typical go-to during the daytime throughout the past decade or so? What are some of your favorites if you could throw them into a little Super Bowl for lunchtime? Maybe right before lunch, maybe right after lunch, or right after you got off work. Not bedtime though.
There's a lot. I would say that Time Reich was good. The Amy Ace's mom, Amy Ace's itself. Um, what else? Actually, the Velvet Punch is probably like a perfect for almost any time of the day. I remember if you keep going, it'll get you eventually maybe a little tired. But during the day, I smoked a lot of that Velvet Punch. It was nice. Um, yeah, like I said, I like everything. But if I didn't like Amy's mom or Amy Ace's, I wouldn't have kept her and kept that cut so long. So that one's a good anytime as well. And if go deep, you could start getting a little tuckered out from it. But my one buddy always loved making the salad joints. He liked mixing the two weeds or whatever kind of. He used to have three weeds, and he like I put them all a little bit of everything in there. And I think that's a really good idea. Like Spartan was saying, you get extra different terps, extra different cannabinoids, and different measures. And yeah, I always remember saying to myself, "Yeah, man, that thing got me fucked up because it was three different kinds, most likely." So I haven't been doing that a lot lately, but I'm gonna have to revisit that whole procedure for sure.
Or you ever do like I call them a salad, like on your trim tray, you have a little bit of ground up of one, you have a little bit of ground up of another strain and another strain, and you
Uh,
just put them all together and make, I call it a salad.
you know what else I like though? The
There you
opposite. I
go.
like I like having flour and then topping it with the keep or hash of the same flour. For some reason, I just like
Oh
that
yeah.
too. Yeah.
The fullest spectrum. It's like Eagle used to say that if you use those three-part grinders with a keef catch, that you're dumbing down your weed. And I kind of like laughed at it for a while, but I'm like, he's fucking right, man. Like you are basically dry sifting. You're doing what the Canadians were doing with the beasters. You're dry sifting it before it's being smoked. But
Yeah.
in this case, it's all done by you, not by some unscrupulous person selling it over the border. But with that said, a lot of grinders, like I know Raw advertises that there's just like a two-part, and a lot of them don't have that keef catch because they want to keep those trichomes in the joint, in the bowl, etc. And I do think that, like you just mentioned, how adding keef onto that same strain kind of gives you like the fullest expression of it because it all did come kind of essentially from the same place. So I think that's a wise tip there for people that haven't tried it. But yeah, like Spartan's got there just a two piece. There's no catch in the bottom. You just open it up and then like knock it out onto a tray. There's the herb stays in the center. So yeah, he's shown off. I like those teeth too, a little bit smaller than a lot of the like Chinese ones you can get on Amazon. And granted, I use those for a long time,
Yeah, these
but
are the sweet leaf grinders, and ever since I've tried them, I've been in love with them. I've bought several of them. I still have my first one, and I've bought some for a bunch of my friends, and I just love them to death because they're simple. And like you said, you're just kind of shredding up your weed. You're not like beating it up or anything like that so much to where you're separating a lot of the trichomes off of it. And if you do, it doesn't matter. You dump it all out anyway, and you mix it all together, and you're getting everything. You're not separating anything out and saving stuff for later and or any of that. That's what trimming's for. When you trim, you use a trim tray and you catch that stuff that normally you would lose. And you smoke that stuff just straight in a nice little hash pipe or something like this. And wait, maybe with a little screen in it or something. And you'll enjoy the shit out of that.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the sweet leaf, and the bigger the better, in my opinion, because it's easier to grind. The bigger it is, right? You can exert more force easier.
Brandon
So,
showed a kind of interesting one on the, I call it the secret show that never aired, where Noah talked a little bit about the investment advice. I was talking about all the Zoom difficulties, but at the very beginning of that secret show, Brandon had this like, I don't think it was called a grinder. I think they were calling it like a macerator or something. It had like nubs instead of like teeth, and it would like kind of like not mush the bud necessarily, but kind of like tear it apart. Macerator might be the wrong word, but I'll have to pull that up and
Was it called a mill? Some of them are
a
called mill.
mill grinder. I think you might be right. And this one had like a little glass container that it caught it in, but it was an interesting concept. I'm always fascinated by grinders, and funny enough, I actually use one called a Whack-It that you might be able to see here. It's got these little beads in it, and
oh
you
yeah,
can
I've seen
definitely
that.
tell it does take some of the. You can see there's trichomes built up in there, so do lose a little bit, but that's over like several years. It's built up, and you can go scrape it out if you're really, really hoping to get every last trichome.
The slap chop of weed.
It is the slap chop. Well, it's I think the slap chop actually uses blades, where this one has
Yeah.
like a it's battery powered. The slap chop is mechanical. Like when you press down, it chops like onions
Oh, I
and
thought that
strawberries.
was mechanical. That one's battery powered.
Yeah, so this is USB rechargeable. And so like I'll just play it over here on my thing, you'll hear it.
Oh, I didn't hear anything, or I didn't hear
Okay.
it. It's
Oh,
very
interesting.
quiet.
Good. Well, then anyway, essentially it just spins around these little metal balls and they whack the bud. They kind of like spin up and down and it's called a whack it, WAKIT. And they've gone up
Did
a
you
lot in
find that does a
price.
good job of separating out the little stems then? Because it kind of
Yeah,
just breaks it off it. Yeah, that's kind of cool.
exactly.
Instead of
If it's the right
grinding up the
dryness,
stem
so
into it.
I have like a card just like on my rolling tray, and I'll use that to kind of flatten out the pile after it grinds it up. And you can see through that little window, like you can have it kind of still chunky. You can get it down to a freaking powder if you wanted to, and anywhere in between. The thing is, I have arthritis in both my hands. I've broken every single finger in both hands, many of them multiple times. So those grinders, like, they would get so sticky after a while, like I couldn't turn them, and like even like my wife just had a hard time. And so somebody gifted me one of these a while ago, and I ended up replacing it after a while, but yeah, that's how I've been going about grinding for quite a while and don't have really any complaints. The one thing that really opened my eyes was hearing two or three different scientists and two or three different presentations talking about if you could make a grinder that quote destroyed THC, then you would be a millionaire. Because if you could just grind something and then it would be deactivated, then
Then it'd be legal.
that's how all these, big companies would destroy their product instead of burning it or soaking it in fluid or mixing it with dirt or whatever the fuck they have to go through to make it non-usable product. So the fact is, like, I for a long time had the sort of misunderstanding that you could maybe lose terps or lose potency. And like in the case that there is a screen and it's catching that and you're not using it until later, you are technically actually losing in that case, or the little bits that you're losing. But I'm talking about like getting rid of it entirely. Like some people are like, oh, if you grind, like I knew guys that would like only use scissors or use their fingers. I'm like, dude, it sticks to your fingers. Like you're losing it on your fingers too. And then look at the scissors. The scissors get covered in hash eventually. So you're always going to lose a little bit in my opinion, unless you just take like a full ass nug and like vaporize it or something. But I think that's
Yeah,
not the most pleasant experience.
I just do what's easiest for me at the time. Like I don't know where my grinder is. I'm not gonna not smoke my weed. I'm gonna take my trimming scissors out and I'm gonna fucking chop it as fine as I can. But I will say it doesn't fucking smoke as good when it's chunky like that, man. When you get a good grind, it smokes way the hell better, man. And
Even
so I'm gonna
burn,
get that grinder. I'm gonna look for that grinder. I'm gonna give it some time before I give up and grab the scissors for sure. So
I'm with you.
I'm not really sure. I'm still a little confused by the purists when they break out the scissors because I'm just like, man, I've tried it both ways. You can't convince me it's better that way.
Or the fingers, dude. Like your fingers have oils on them that are going to get onto the buds and they stick to the resin. And then the resin, like you get finger hash essentially. So it's like that to me has to be one of the least efficient, effective ways. But we always have our hands attached to our arm if you've got one, so or two. And so that way you're not going to forget it or lose it. Um,
That's true. That's true.
I always like the saying, I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached to my body or something like that. They used to say that when I was a kid all the time. I feel like I don't hear that anymore. Maybe that must make it an old timey kind of saying. But yeah.
I've heard that one a lot, and I've heard use your head for something other than a hat rack. I've heard that one a lot too.
That's a good one. A good one that I just heard, and this is more on like the serious motivational side of things, was the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. I was like, damn, man,
That's
that's a good
cool.
one.
That's cool.
And that's true, in my opinion. A lot of the time, you gotta work hard to earn that success.
What about lotto winners?
We could talk about it. There's a lot of information that actually says it ruins their life. Most of them, if you don't earn the money, you end up blowing it. You try and irresponsibly give it out to family and friends because they're asking you for it because they think that you have more than you do because they don't think about the taxes.
I just want to go on record to say, go ahead and ruin my life. I'll take the lotto winners.
I think like only like one out of 150 has had like a positive experience, and they literally changed their name and like moved off grid. So I don't know if you could
Well, that's
consider that a win.
exactly what my plans would be. So, well, not changing my name, but moving off grid for sure.
It would just like be a balance of if people could still communicate with you or not, because 9 out of 10 of them is going to keep asking for something, whether directly or
People,
indirectly.
people can ask all they want, and I can block, and then they go away.
Yeah,
Not
it's
that
all about
big.
making boundaries, keeping boundaries. I will say this, a lot of general people out in general society are a lot weaker willed than Spartan grown, are a lot less intestinal fortitude and general moral principles. A lot of people will take the cheap, easy, and convenient way in a lot of aspects of life. And it's much more rare that somebody actually stands on their principles and will say, um, I'm going to respect my own boundaries and I don't even know you, so I'm not going to give you stuff that, you know, you didn't earn. And I guess the lottery winner could argue that they earned it because they bought the ticket. You gotta buy the ticket to take the ride or get the chance. So I actually won a car in a lottery. So it was a interesting situation, but things happen, man. I do believe that only enter the ones that you really feel like you want to win or need to win. That even
Yeah,
goes
and
to
be
like,
aware that you have to pay taxes on the stuff that you win
yep,
too. A lot of people are like, "What? I got to pay how much to claim this prize?"
it's like 2 grand in taxes from my broke college student ass to get like a 2-year lease on a Mini Cooper that I won. So ended up being a good deal overall. I got like the car 2 years later for like 10 or 12 grand off, and I actually did love the car. So drove it till somebody totaled it on the side of the road and replaced it with insurance, model year newer, or whatever. And now my wife still has that car and it runs. So shout out to Mini Cooper. It's not the perfect car, but they're fun to drive and gets the job done. But yeah, I think going to the cannabis side of things, I see a lot of seed giveaways. I see a lot of, book giveaways. I see a lot of everything, nutrient giveaways, light giveaways. If you enter every giveaway and your page looks like a giveaway reposting page, and there's not like a full grow of uninterrupted like cannabis growth on there, I would just speculate your chances of winning a giveaway are significantly lower. Because even if you won, even if it's like a random number generator, they might see like, oh man, all this fucking guy does is enter giveaways all the time, all day, every day. And like, no, it's legal. You're legally allowed to do that. That's within your. But some of them are gonna be like, maybe I'm gonna re-roll that random number. I forgot what number it was. Let me double check. And I would never do anything like that, to be frank. But I do know that there are people out there that they might not even say like this is a random giveaway. They'll just say like, we're gonna pick the best entry. We're gonna pick the person who sounds the most passionate or most excited. And I think that there's fairness in doing that. Or like we had a couple where I asked questions like, "What's the name of our original host?" and things like that. And the people that knew it, they ended up getting rewarded for it. So I think there's a cool element in that. But yeah, don't always want to make it about the giveaways, that's for sure. And I'm glad that we have a pretty good balance here, where I think we do them when it feels right. And in terms of entering them, I think this is maybe like a hippy dippy karmic message from Jack, but yeah, I've only entered a few. Here's another example. My Curador. I saw this thing. I was like, holy shit, that's pretty cool. It's a weed fridge. Keeps it 60 degrees, 60% relative humidity. And I was like, fuck it. I'm entering. Entered, tagged all the people that I needed to tag, followed all the people, whatever. And sure enough, I won. And like my wife with the Tommy Chong thing. Um, and maybe I just am lucky because I actually choose to be grateful for it and reflect on and acknowledge the times that it's happened. I think a lot of people are actually lucky and then they just downplay how lucky we are when things go well. It's like, oh yeah, things were supposed to go that way. And then when things go poorly, it's like, oh, woe is me. But you could also have the opposite attitude. Things are going poorly, it's like, what can I do to make it different? And when things are going positive, like, how did you maybe put yourself in that position and how can you make it happen again? Because think another going back to quotes, there was one that's like, I create my own luck or something like, and then something related to that was like, the people who work really hard tend to always end up being really lucky, like coincidentally, right? And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. You put yourself in the position, if you're right by people and you work hard, eventually things are gonna fall in line. And even if you're going through that time where things are not going well, whether it's your garden or life, um, keep on keeping on, man, because it might just be right around the corner. I'm always reminded of like this digging image where this guy's like digging, 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 and then he just quits. And then like there's the image, the rest of it, like there's a fucking gold mine right behind it. And then the next guy came and just finished up or whatever, just continued to dig a little bit further. And so it might just be that, few extra percent, that few more days, that extra week, extra month. Just keep pushing, don't give up,
Well,
especially on
yeah, just
yourself.
yeah, the more important thing, and this is especially true with growing too. Um, the most important thing is to learn to enjoy the trip, right? Learn to enjoy the process because if you're not going to enjoy the process, you're not going to keep doing it and be able to keep going, and all that. It's going to become a job, it's going to become a chore, and then it's not going to happen anymore. So, I mean, if what brought you to gardening, or if you've got a love for gardening, just, chase that. There's so many different things. You could even just do like little experiments or side by sides if you wanted to. Or, oh, I wonder what happens if I try growing in this way that I've never tried before. Or if whenever I try growing this plant that I never grew before. Or, man, there's a billion different examples of different things you could play with to keep you more interested. But that's what I would do for myself as a gardener is give myself a reason to be excited to get down in the garden and see what's going on with the plant. And I'm not gonna lie, there's been times for sure where I would, especially when I had a full load of patients and all that, and I was growing for a lot more people than just myself in a smaller space than I have now. And it was almost like a job because you wanted to make sure you're doing a good job and you didn't want to run out or have a bad crop, and it could be tough. But then for me, I found just genetics and hunting genetics was the thing that I was always. Man, it's just this feeling when you see new seed pop, a new seedling pop, right? And you're like, oh my God, what could it could be anything, right? And so that's what always kept me growing. But then there's just technology, right? With the lighting or changing spectrums or with the nutrient, like maybe you don't want to play with organics. I've done both and still do both. And it's fun to try new nutrient lines or a new organic technique or a new IPM technique. There's just a billion reasons. But if you are, so what I'm saying is like do something for the sake of doing it. Don't be doing something. It's like doing something good is so there's good in the world. Don't do something good because you expect it to be returned upon you, and you're waiting for this, good thing to happen because you did, you know, XYZ good things, and you're waiting for your handout. That kind of kills the vibe, man. It's more like find out what you're doing. If it's gardening, learn to love that, and then it doesn't matter. You're just putting good out into the world, and the world's better for it. And then it comes back to you in unexpected ways, I think.
100% agree with that. And I think there's always something new to keep it exciting. In cannabis, it could be, well, if it starts to get stale, like maybe you make seeds for the first time if you haven't made seeds before. Maybe you start researching the breeding. Like our podcast is a lot about culture and grow and the specific technical. We answer questions, we cover scientific papers, which we haven't done that in quite a little while. So I'm going to try and find a scientific research article to come up in the next week or so. But we're not always talking about, you know, the specifics of like how to reverse a plant or, what is the difference between an F1 and an F2, an F3, an F4, an F5? And why would someone take something to F8? Why would somebody only take something to F3? What is the difference from the F3 to F1? And things like that. Like we can definitely go down those topics, but I would generally say a lot of our listeners are not making their own seeds yet. But more and more of them, I think, hearing our own experiences and others' experiences are getting more open to it. Seed Person One is a great member of the community. I see him. He was the first one in chat tonight, and he's still here with us. And shout out to Seed Person One, doing great things and getting those seeds out to the community. But
There might be some listeners out there making seeds, not intentionally, but there might be out there making some seeds. I know I have.
intentional or unintentional. But when you get to that point of it being intentional and you kind of I've gotten into some hobbies and somebody was asking me about one and I couldn't put my words into like why I necessarily loved it. And then I was reading this book about it, and this guy said that he does it not because it's a like a choice, but because it's a compulsion. And I think that a certain element of any hobby, if you're really like in love with it, addicted or hooked, whatever it is, it gets the grasp in you. It's one of those things that like you might be able to think about all day or just throughout the day, or that you dream about it, you wake up thinking about it, like different new things and new ways to approach it. And I think it's so important to keep that passion, keep that excitement alive, because eventually, maybe you will hit a wall. You've listened to all the instructional things, you've done, got a few grows under your belt, you've got a bunch of new technology. But even then, like Spartan was saying, I think doing like a side by side, something simple, like I'm gonna just remove way more leaves on this plant than I normally do, or I'm gonna leave way more leaves than I normally do, and see how that compares, and just do it with one plant and see, like, it's just like, because then that normal grow, that was just going to be another, if you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 100 grows under your belt, that was going to be 101. Well, now it's number one because now it's the only time that you've done X versus Y. And you're like, oh man, like even if Y completely shits the bed, at least you're like watching it and you're like wondering, like, is it going to weigh up well? Is it going to bud well? Is it going to finish how the other ones do? And then like you might find on occasion, like, oh man, I could actually leave more leaves on the plant than I thought. Or I can take more leaves off than I thought. And it'll be fine. Both of them did fine. This one did a little bit better. This one was a little bit, beefier buds, or this one was a little bit, less mold or had less other issues. Like there's so many reasons to do these things. And until you actually sit down and try it side by side, like you can hear it on our show, but I still personally think like no replacement for firsthand experience. It's the strongest teacher of all because you could watch it, hear it, see about it, and once it happens to you, you're gonna be like, oh man, that gut punch of losing a crop to bud rot or white powdery mildew or some pest is gonna get you into IPM. Like no one wants to care
Yeah.
about IPM until they need to.
Well, it's very important too, the factor of you want to try it because of the environment is not a constant. You know what I mean? If we're doing a mathematical equation here, we got to put, make this a variable for the, because there's very few, when you look at every home grower out there, very few percentage of those have dialed in rooms that don't swing, that are just, perfect with the environment. And I don't think we're even on that at the level at the Trichome Forge yet, where I would say we're dialed in perfectly like that. It's
I'm
going to
not.
swing a little bit. Yeah.
And you don't have to be. That's actually one of the encouraging things is if you can
Yeah.
get it close, it can work.
Yeah, and then there's the intangible, the things that we're not thinking about, the things that we don't track, like barometric pressure and elevation, and all these other things that may or may not have effects on plant growth. We don't know. So what, like we said before, what we said is gonna be something that works great in our grow room doesn't mean it's gonna work great in your grow room. How you gonna find that out is trying it and continuing to do things that do work and trying to find other ways of doing things that aren't working great, and you got to dial your own grow in. And what I do in my own home grow as compared to what I do in the Trichome Forge are very different things, very different SOPs, we'll say. And it's because of the environment. So that's another thing that makes growing kind of awesome, in my opinion, is that it keeps you on your toes. I often say we have to be MacGyvers in the grow room. We have to just make solutions out of what we have available. And sometimes it's not ideal, but a paper clip and some duct tape you can go a long way with sometimes. But but that's what makes it fun, and that's what makes it to me, and that's what makes it more exciting to get down in there and to solve that problem, and then see the results in the grow room and see, a successful crop or whatever it is that you measure your success with. You can really focus in on things and strive to do that. Um, and the plant seems to respond. And like we were talking, I think it was last week, Todd was saying it too. I think we all were saying it was like, what other plant can you grow that get a different expression, every time, different smells, different colors, aromas. There's not many out there, so this you can stick with this plant for a long, long time and not get bored of it. I promise you.
Always something new. And even if they're like subtle variations, even just like baked pony, you could say like, how could somebody grow so many GMOs? That's because there's a lot of variation in the GMO. Like the idea, a lot of people believe it's garlic, mushroom, onion. But even if it was named for that, it's not. But those flavors are definitely present in certain phenos and expressions of it. So varying levels. Like if it was garlic dominant versus onion dominant versus mushroom dominant. I hate mushrooms for the most part, unless it's truffle. So I would hate the mushroom dominant one, but I like garlic, and I'm okay on onion. I think sometimes onion kind of has a little bit of the body odory smell to it, and especially in cannabis because it can be paired with some of those funkier, rotted, just stinky, nasty aromas, which I think often have great effects, but
I
are
was
not
gonna
the
say they
most
tend to
pleasant
be
smells.
strong effects to me. I feel like those aromas usually the foul side of things tend to be pretty heavy hitters in my experience.
Same with like the chems and the gases, and
Yeah, gas, yeah, for sure.
I think that just comes with the concept like a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Like some of the medicine's gonna be not the best tasting. So as much as I love tasty weed, there's like weed should taste good is like a brand or something. Like I see stickers and hats and it's a big thing. I think it might be Canadian, I'm not sure. But I see it all over. But that being said, some of the best weed I ever had
I
was some
think
like,
it's I think we should take well I do see it everywhere, but I think I see it like marketed and seen it first was the Mendo Dope Boys
oh, okay.
because they
That's
had it on
probably
their merch.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I'm also saying like we shouldn't overlook like an old tie that's like spicy and funky and sandalwoody, like just nasty kind of to some people's palate, but it gets you so high that you're like seeing stars. Like it's you go outside and look at like the lights and it's just like everything is so vibrant. You're like, what the fuck? Like this doesn't it feels more like a different drug than cannabis even. So some of those effects, although undesirable for some people, I think are great experiences that should be safely and enjoyed in comfortable settings. Once you get familiar with any strain, I think you can branch out and go hike or go outside and play around. But um, I think a lot of times people actually underestimate cannabis and how powerful it can be, especially if they try to like I don't know go out and do something in the real world. So uh, panic attacks, anxiety attacks, and things like that I think might happen because they're having things in society provoke it on top of the cannabis maybe put them in a state that was a little bit elevated. So it's a set and setting, just like maybe some other more serious drugs that somebody would consider needs to be looked at with cannabis, where most of us are just using it at home, but or out in a park somewhere or something. But some people use it at like, and I'm guilty of this myself, in big, like festival settings, like a music festival. And most of the time it's great. It's like people there are also doing it. So you're in a good vibe. But I think some people underestimate maybe how much they don't enjoy crowds. And the cannabis maybe turns up the fact that like, holy shit, there's a lot of strangers here that I don't know. And maybe some of them are not they start having negative thoughts. And it can get people, I've seen people like wig out and like friends that have like used cannabis for a long time just kind of ruin their time by not taking seriously enough, like heeding that warning, like, hey, this shit is it's strong. Like only take a few hits of that and then stop. Like, or maybe don't even try it. Like if you're an amateur, get newer to it. Take something that's a little bit less strong. Because that is one of those things I would say with more people in enjoying cannabis and joining the space. I think we need to be responsible stewards as much as we can to try and prevent people from like greening out if possible, like the newer folks, especially if you're the one introducing them. If they want to go and, say, I'm going to take the 1,000 milligram edible, even though they've never tried shit before, like you could be like, hey, I would probably suggest starting smaller. But people are going to do whatever they want to do. So adults have the freedom to make their own decisions. But at the same time, you know, part of making this an enjoyable space is allowing people to not freak out when they're using what is also kind of at the same time by like experienced users almost looked at as like benign. Like, okay, it's just weed, dude. Like, chill out. Like, I drive on it. I use it every day. I smoke it in the morning, and I'm one of those people. Like, I fucking, I'm there with you. But for somebody who doesn't smoke, but maybe once a month, it's a lot different, or maybe once a week even. They're going back to Tao was talking about the Velvet Punch and how he uses it for the daytime. But if you use enough of it, it's one that I can fall asleep using. So it's like I used to call them hybrids, but more of like a, middle of the road kind of strain. And it's not so heavy that it will like set me down on the couch and make me not able to do stuff, but it also gives me a little medical therapeutic relief. And man, where was I going with that? But
Well, I wouldn't underestimate also to we still it doesn't seem like it should be common knowledge. It should be something that everybody kind of just knows. But one thing that we forget to say a lot, and that's like when you're trying to avoid green out, either with yourself or with somebody else, it's always nice to have, it's getting cheaper and cheaper now too, some kind of CBD product that you can ingest or even hopefully smoke. CBD isolate, something like that. I tried that myself. Not, yeah, I think it was isolate like powder, but we just dabbed it and it works great to bring down like the anxiousness and some of those side effects of too much THC.
It almost like washes out my whole entire effect. Like the desired effect for me goes away, and like I like it, so it almost melts away like what I'm enjoying. But for somebody who's like paranoid or having a panic attack or uncomfortable, CBD, distillate, isolate, whatever, dabbed. I think the instantaneous of that, there's something special to it. Edibles take a little too long, so like even like a if you're gonna do a CBD, maybe oil sublingually, I think that if you hold it under your tongue for like 5 or 10 minutes or something crazy. I know it's like it seems like a long time and it tastes a little gross, but it's more effective, I think, if you actually take it sublingual to get it into your bloodstream a little quicker.
It's like an alcohol tincture or something that'll work. You need something that's going to cross that blood barrier or whatever they call that. Um, if it's just a straight isolate, I don't think it's going to do much. So yeah, make sure. Well, even if you swallow it though, that'll do something. If it's
Right.
decarbed.
But yeah, it's the thing that I was going to with the my experience of the Velvet Punch and Taos is a lot of people say it's like kind of a middle of the road hybrid or like daytime. You can sleep if you want to. It's not gonna like keep you up all night. But somebody rated it like a heavy indica. So like everybody's endocannabinoid system is a little bit different. So like they were like 9 out of 10, like super like in the couch, like sleepy, like daytime or right before bed use. And so I thought that was interesting. And it's also sort of made me open my eyes to and realize that I needed to vary a little bit how I gave my advice when I first started years ago with, being on the show and having a lot of people naturally after we do a show, people will be like, "Hey, I heard you talk about this," and then they'll ask a question related to something that we talked about. And maybe it could just be something related to their grow in this specific case. And I used to just be like, do XYZ. Like, oh, here's the problem with your plant. Here's what you need to do. Now I'm like much more investigative with it. I'll ask more questions. And I'll also, instead of, even if I know the answer, this is maybe a little bit coy, but I'll try and like teach people in a way that they teach themselves. So I'll ask questions that aren't like just about their environment. I'll ask questions like, what are you going to do next? Like what's your plan to go from here? And they might be like nothing. And I'd be like, well, you've got pests, so like you need to do IPM or something. Like what options do you have available to you? And then they maybe list what the ones are and maybe this one could be effective for X, Y, and Z reasons. This one's actually banned, you should avoid it. Or this one is gonna cause problems. Like Eagle 20, for example, like illegal, turns into hydrogen cyanide, it's poisonous, toxic, like don't ever use it. And it unfortunately was commonplace in the industry for many, many years, a couple decades ago, and it still pops on certain tests if you look around certain states. So that's something to always be open and honest about. But from that kind of stuff, I've realized, like Spartan mentioned earlier, everyone's environment's so different. Like I'm about to go to Las Vegas for Champs, the cannabis trade show, and I've got my buddy Johnny in Vegas, and I know there's other people out there. So if you do happen to be in Vegas, this is a little bit off topic, but at Champs, we're going to be at booth 2251. So check out Jack Greenstock there at Champs. But Vegas is so much drier most of the year than where I'm at in San Diego. We have Santa Ana winds, which make me sympathetic or empathetic, whatever it is, to people in Vegas because sometimes we get 0% humidity and like high heat. So hot and dry. It literally feels like a desert for like a week or two at a time. And many of you will probably realize from the recent fires, like 100-mile-an-hour winds and like just bone dry. It's a bad combination. But that's not how it is most of the time. Most of the time, there's anywhere from 30 to 90% humidity. Like it's relatively more humid. Like we're by the ocean, there's lots of water. That moisture sits in the air and it floats around. It's not like Florida humid where it's kind of like higher all the time, but we do have a decent amount. So when I tried to talk with people, like with my system, using the herbs now to dry, like my environment is different than Swami or not Johnny Caniseed in Vegas, and maybe my other buddies in Florida where they're at 100% relative humidity for like a lot of their year, and so my advice, what works for me in my environment, like Spartan was talking about, it might be completely non-applicable to you based on your environment. Because if you're so much drier or so much more humid, and I'm like right in the middle, then my SOP might not exactly work for you. And so I think it's good to try and maybe walk people through that a little bit to break them out of the idea of like, I see this person successful, and this is a good idea at the beginning. Follow that person's strategy, and then you can also be successful if you replicate for the most part what they're doing. But it doesn't have to be one-to-one clone, like the exact temperature, exact humidity, exact light, exact nutrient. You can do a lot of stuff similar and get similar results, or even better, because your environment calls for something different. Like an example would be if you are in Florida with the super high humidity, you might want to be in a plastic pot like we're going to get into this a little bit, the second half of the show, the sub-irrigated planters, the city picker, the earth box. Because I've noticed as my environment does tend to, once I get plants in there and seal up the tent, float on the higher side of the humidity, that switching from regular pots, fabric pots or whatever, to a plastic pot or an earth box, it cut down the humidity, especially they have this little shower cap option. So a lot of that moisture that's in the soil is contained in the soil versus evaporating out more quickly and just becoming part of that. Because I'm in a small 5 square foot tent, it's doesn't take a lot of time for that water to work its way into the environment. And as soon as you open up that tent flap, you can see the humidity drop from like 70 to like 30, you know? And so there's water is a huge part that is easy to underestimate, from overwatering, underwatering to being too dry or being too humid in your environment. But just by understanding and identifying what your general environment is, and like if you're like Spartan, winter might be super dry, but then summer might be super humid. So you have to plan for and account for each season is going to be a little bit different. It's not just like Florida where it's hot and humid pretty much all year round. And Vegas where similar. It's pretty much dry all year round, even when it gets cooler. So those small subtle details from one garden to another, we're not just saying like it depends to be, cagey or whatever. We're trying to be accurate and honest and open with you to help you realize that your garden is actually different than mine. And so the same input might have a different output. And once that connects, you can start to just identify the general fundamentals and try to do best to make them happen within your space.
Yeah, and it's really a compliment. Um, and that's how you should take it when you're asking a gardener or somebody about gardening for help or advice on your garden. Um, if they're asking you questions back rather than just giving you an answer straight back, they're asking questions back to really identify the problem and really dial in the questions, because often it could be 5 to 6 different things to get what's causing whatever the issue is. Um, Take it as a compliment, because that person's really trying to help you. They're taking time out of their day now and really digging into the problem to try to get you the right answer. So it's not like a pointing finger kind of thing or anything that you should get upset about. And they might not always have the right answer. I'm talking about myself here when I say they, but I'm sure everyone else on the panel uh, has the same things. Be just as patient with me, because I'm trying to figure it out too, and it could be so many things, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I don't want you to put the wrong fix and I'll make the problem worse.
We're
So
trying our best.
yeah, so it's generally speaking, that's what's going to happen. If you ask a question, I'm going to have questions for you before I really have much of an answer back for you.
Unless it's super obvious, like, hey, what pest is this? And I'm like, that's spider mites.
Right, yeah, yeah. A direct question like, "Hey, can you tell me what this light is about?"
Yeah,
That's
like what's the
different.
cheapest light for a 2x2 or something, like, that is not going to
Yeah,
burn my house down.
exactly, exactly.
I actually like those kind of questions, and I respect and appreciate that they have done at least enough of the research to realize that like some lights are heating up sockets, and maybe they even started with one of them because it was the cheapest option, and they're like, hey, I'm ready to move on. Like I've seen that I replaced the outlet or whatever and got everything fixed up, but I want to not have this next one get cooked as well. And it's nice to be able to recommend, a decent option to people, and something that like, although it's not the newest, I actually love that I'm working with a little bit older technology now, because even though it's LED and it's like, I think they might be Samsung LM301s on my HLG board from like 2019 or 2020. But the fact of the matter is, even if it's not, like, I know it grows dank. I know it's efficient. It's way more efficient than like CFLs or T5 or T8 or all these other veg light options that people are still using and selling in hydro stores, grow stores, etc. Being recommended on the internet on, Grow Weed Easy type websites, like they'll like Kyle Breeder had like a wooden board. He's an electrician. He had like a bunch of like the curly Q CFL bulbs like drilled up into it, and that was like one of his first grow lights. And granted, whatever you got to do to get the job done and get you started, but it's nice to. And HLG is just one of the many, many, many great LED manufacturers, in my opinion, that is putting stuff out there. But it's one that I've had for several years now. It's grown me several veg crops, and like I even flowered under it a couple times just to fuck around, and I was blown away by how well it did. So, and mine's only like the little 65 water, but I'm in like a 1x2. I think they were in like a 2x2, so I recommended maybe the 100 watt. Either way, still available, which is cool to see. The company's still in business because sometimes the companies that are fly by night are fly by night. They're gone within a year or two, or change names, Instagram accounts, etc. So it's good to have a little bit of accountability and know that like Spartan Grown has been here doing the show for many years. So if you get a light from him or something that he works with, like you're gonna be able to contact him in a week or a month or a year. We're still gonna be here. This is episode 302. We've been here for 5+ years now, so coming on 6 at some point. But yeah, we're still gonna be around. We're not trying to, that's why I've always been happy to not have a bunch of sponsors or giveaways because a lot of times the giveaways are a sponsor. It's like, oh, well, we got sponsored by the seed bank, so they gave us 10,000 seeds to give away throughout the year. So we're going to give away a pack of seeds every single episode. And it's like, I'm happy that they're getting seeds out to the community, but at the same time, I would rather like tell you who I think the good breeders are, and then you can make the decision if you want to go buy seeds from that person. Like
Well,
you
and
don't
more
have to.
importantly, I would like to hear what are you looking for in a seed? What kind of strain is your personal search for? Is it a medicinal thing? Is it a flavor thing? Is it an effect thing? Because I could recommend some really awesome weed that won't work for what you're looking for. I mean
That's
that's
so true. So many times when somebody DMs me something like that, fortunately, and I didn't give you all the context about this, but they'll say like, "Hey, I heard you talking about pineapple on the podcast, and that sounds so good. Like, what pineapple strains would you recommend? Like, where can I get them?" And so that would be an easy one for me to be like, pineapple upside down cake from Humboldt Seed Company is a good seed line. There's cuts of it out there that are very solid. There's also, Relic Seeds has a couple. He did like the Cinderella 99 pineapple pheno, and I think there's pineapple fields out there as well. There's a couple really good ones, but like you said, Spartan, sometimes somebody will say like I have pain or somebody in my family has cancer or X, Y, and Z. And I don't want to say who it was, but one of our listeners, and I think they messaged you too, Spartan, because they mentioned in the message like, "Hey, I sent the same message to Spartan, but a family member who had skin cancer, they'd been giving them RSO, and other than the small amount that they had like removed surgically, like of the skin on the area, all the other skin cancer is gone. It's completely in remission, and the RSO helped. They started applying it, and it was able to get rid of it in that instance. So I'm really happy that we do talk about this stuff because to have another real world example, somebody in our messages telling us, and like with a photo attached showing like the spot, and it's just heartwarming, man. That's honestly really life changing because especially on certain parts of the body. Skin cancer is not something to be taken lightly. It can spread into other organs, and it does kill people every year. So I'm very, very, very happy that Rick made it so popular. Rick Simpson, RSO, Rick Simpson Oil, the Canadian wonder, I like to call him, the guy who really, I think, him and Charlotte Figge. I mean, like the THC Godfather and the CBD Godmother, and rest in peace, Charlotte. And I hope that Rick is actually doing well because I know he had a stroke maybe a year or two ago, and he's been getting through some medical bills. And I know a lot of the community's rallied behind him. So if you can, definitely make sure to support him if you're able to.
I can say that I've personally directed to Rick's website, which I was going to just say that his website is got a lot of great information, and that's what started me on the journey of making it for my uncle and helping him beat cancer. And that website is phoenixtears.ca, and that's because it's a Canadian webpage. And I just wanted to shout that out one more time because it's not the same as like RickSimpsonOil.com or anything like that. It's phoenixtears.com. And
.ca, like you said.
yeah, or sorry, .ca, not .com. And it's got great information there. And the reason I point people there too is because it's got like dosage information. It's how you start someone who's never had RSO, how you should start them, and you know, the whole the whole thing. A lot of frequently asked questions. Uh,
There's a reason that it's called RSO. He's literally helped over the last time I heard it was like 5,000, but I think it's probably much more. And especially like the domino effect that it's had, the people that like he doesn't count because it wasn't his personal hand doing it, but like he indirectly taught Spartan, who helped his family, who's gone on to help many, many, many others. And then our podcast helped this individual who just sent me the message today about their loved one that they, in my opinion, saved or, healed, however you want to look at it. That's a amazing Rick's impact, the amount of lives. Like I've always thought like if you could be plus one in life, like if you could say like I was a lifeguard for like my first job, that was like a paycheck job. And I actually had to save a couple people, like a couple kids fell in the water and were drowning and I'd pull them out. And it's like you actually have the responsibility. You can make someone's life meaningfully better. In that case, like literally save their life. And with like medicine, I think that it's just as much of the case because, cancer does take so many. And even if it's not a life that's able to be saved necessarily, like they do end up passing, oftentimes it just relieves so much pain, so much stress, so much anxiety that they're having about the, ailment, about the disorder, about the whatever it is that they're diagnosed with.
it treats a lot of the side effects of even the modern medication, maybe, especially like in the case of cancer, the chemotherapy stuff brings down inflammation in the body just overall, which has a huge help. Like that just dials down the pain, basically, because most of these people, their joints and everything else is starting to hurt them because they're just inflamed all the way throughout. Excuse me.
That's the
So
most
yeah,
underestimated part in cannabis, in my opinion, is like we always talk, oh, you can read like this terpene reduces inflammation or cannabis reduces inflammation. And we just kind of brush over that. But inflammation, if you talk to doctors, scientists, all these people that look into like the downstream effects of it, inflammation is like one of the worst things for your body. It is needed when you're injured to, help repair an injury and things like that. You want to get the area inflamed, bring new blood, and slow down a little bit of the circulation, etc. But the general inflammation that most of us carry from poor diet and just injuries and things like that, or even just genetic uh, predisposition. Some people have underlying conditions that create more inflammation. I think Crohn's is an example, or IBS is another example,
yeah,
where people have internal or even external inflammation, like the skin, like psoriasis and things like that. So,
fibromyalgia. I can never say that word, fibro.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, for me, I'm one of those. Yes, I hate calling myself old school because it makes me feel old, right? And I am getting gray and white in my beard already. So, but I am old school with it when it's like when I see it with my own eyes. I was pretty fucking convinced, man. I mean, you can talk about it, you can read about it, you can sit there and listen to people's stories. All great. But you see it with your own fucking eyes, with your own family member who you've known your whole life. It's not a paid actor in any way. And I saw it gradually too. Like I was able to get the updates every time he went and got the new numbers, and the numbers were getting better, and the size of the tumors were shrinking, and having to dial back other medications that were now miraculously working better somehow. Um, I've got it all documented in his paper in his all the paperwork he gave to me, his file. He gave me his whole medical file after that, and I mean, and then with modern medicine said, hey, we can't do anymore. In his situation, you're done. We don't have any more. Go home and die. And I was like, nah, it's not going down like that. And so the only thing we changed, literally the only thing we changed was I started giving him full spectrum cannabis oil. And I mean, it saved his life. And sometimes you don't win them all, but I'm addicted, right? I've sent out at least, I know I've broken the 1,000 gram mark. I know I have. Of just RSO to different patients that need it for sure.
it's multiple
And
pounds.
yeah, yeah, and it's you don't do shit like that on your own time if you don't believe in it.
That's like I was saying
And
earlier, you're not doing it because you want to. It's like a compulsion at this point. You feel
yeah,
the
yeah,
need,
it's
like your
like how
heart's
can
like,
I not?
I have to help people.
It's like can I do good or do I do bad? Because to me, to not do that, I'm doing bad because I have the ability to do it. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, it's
It's a
yeah,
like it's a skill and it's a blessing to be able to grow, to be able to extract and to be able to even communicate. there's a lot of people out there that are nervous to come on a podcast because they are afraid to sound the wrong way or this or that. They might say the wrong thing or they don't feel confident enough to come in and just chat, but they could offer so much. That's why I love opening up the panel so often to let people know, like, hey, we're just like you. We're just growers out there that are trying to make a little bit of a difference and help people heal and help ourselves.
think I think you muted me, Jack.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife. I'm
Oh,
sorry. She
sorry. Okay.
just
Yeah, I was like,
no, it's
man,
all
it looks
good.
like
She
he's
came in.
trying
She
to
was like, the halftime show is about to start, and I told her to tell me. But it's a smaller panel tonight, and I want to stay focused and maybe get into what I mentioned in the earlier part of the show that we're going to talk about in the second half, which is SIPS, because it's something that we just don't necessarily talk about a whole. We do talk about it a lot. We don't necessarily show it and explain like how it works and why we do it. And since Spartan and I are both SIP guys, and I'm sure Tao can add a little bit of to the conversation because he's been in organic soil for a long time and he's knowledgeable about how to grow good herb. Um,
Kinnaid, I got to get me a Sips. I really do. I don't know what the hell I'm thinking.
You got to go to the local Home Depot or whatever hardware store that's by you, big box hardware store. Even some the grocery stores up here even sell like Walmart will have it in the garden section. I've seen them. And just get you a city picker, Tom, man. You can get one of the small ones. You don't even got to get a big one. I'm telling you, man, you're gonna fall in love.
I'm
Takes it.
definitely gonna do it. I'm doing it. So
It puts it to me the thing that it like won me over is when I tried the sip container and it was an earth box. It wasn't the city picker, but the city pickers I just like their dimensions better. They're more square.
right, right.
But the earth box is a little bit bigger of a volume of soil, but the size of the plant they grew out of that thing, it was ridiculous. And just the ease of like, I mean, look, do you see water? Yes. Okay, don't water. Look down that pipe. Do you not see water? Yeah, I don't see water today. Okay, put water in it. It's like made it so easy on, oh, when do I water? There's no like using somebody's opinion on if it's moist or not moist or
Right. You don't have to
any of
lift
that
it up,
bullshit.
think if
Relying
it's
on a
wet
meter that's
or if
only
I'm extra
touching
strong today. Yeah.
the meter is
Yeah,
only
yeah.
touching one part of the soil, and maybe the meter is not the best. And a lot of those moisture meters, in my experience, tend to not be unless you spend decent money on them. But this is albopepper.com, so it's not even a cannabis specific. But I love this because what actually got me into the sips, on top of seeing Spartan, Cheddar Bob, and many others kill it with their Earthbox and City Pickers, was seeing somebody grow corn in a Home Depot bucket, kind of just like this, where they just had, in this case, like they've got bottles to make it easier to feed or just to feed water into the bottom. But they planted into a 5 gallon Home Depot bucket. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit because this kind of shows you the cross-sectional view of what a sip is. This is more of like in the natural case where you'll see like a tree next to a river or a creek or a lake or something, an aquifer, and it has a saturated zone, capillary fringe, and then the saturated zone, unsaturated zones. So the roots basically are at some point always having access to water, oxygen, and a combination of both. So it tends to do really well. But the over here on the right, you'll see like this is just Amazon advertisement, but this is the Earthbox, and it says yeah, Earthbox Garden Kit. They have these four little wheels, and this is the tube that you look down. It's like a little PVC pipe that Spartan was just referring to. And when you look down, if it's dry, you just add water. And if there's water in there, you don't have to do anything. If you add too much water, what happens? There's this little overfill thing right here, and it just drips out the bottom. So in a tent, you've got that little tray underneath, and if you're outdoors, then you're all good. They've also shown, like here, there's a little playlist if you want to go look on YouTube, uh, sip raised beds. So people will put like
Yeah, that's
stone down.
cool.
I think it's a really good idea. And allowing yourself to have a raised bed. I'm probably going to do this with Lady Greenstock, to be honest, in the coming months, because we've got a good little spot that we're about to start setting up. But the
Shout out to Jeremy at Builder Soil too. He's got a YouTube channel where he's been doing side by sides with his tent kits. The only thing difference is the lights, and he's got one of the Grandmaster LEDs in there, so it's cool to be been watching. Um, but he did a great walkthrough just today. I think it released it because I watched it right before the show of SIP containers, of loading up how to load up I think he was using earth boxes, but they're a little bit more square now, the one that he had. I really like the design. I don't know, I might have to check that one out too.
I love my Earth box, I will say, and here's just a little bit better side angle of what they actually look like in the pots. You've got the fill tube here. There's an air chamber, which in the case of the Earth box is like a plastic grate that separates the potting soil from the water reservoir. And
And
within
they
that,
do the
you
corners instead of the middle, but yeah, it's similar.
right. And the one advice that I got from Smiley's Garden was like you can throw down like a piece of like brown like paper, like brown paper bag or whatever, just like it could even be like newspaper or something. If you're worried about the soil, if it's finely screened enough that you're worried the soil is going to fall into the water, that'll just prevent it from falling into the water as much. And by the end of the grow, the soil essentially eats up that little bit of paper, and the roots are still able to grow through it. So it tends to work well for him. So that was a interesting option if people are worried about that or having those concerns. And the wicking thing is kind of an interesting concept. So in the earth box, they have like a corner that you pack in really tight that actually goes down. In this case, it's in the center, like Spartan was describing. Like they have a little area where the water is actually able to touch the soil. In the earth box, the drip out's actually in the center, and then the wicks are on the corners. So you pack basically soil into like I think it's two of the four corners really densely, and that basically makes like a wick that goes up the side where the soil is attached to the water, and it
Yeah,
goes up to
the
the top
reason
and
that
then
you do
spreads
it
out.
so what I do, a little hack too, is when you're packing those dense, I add a little water so I can make it a little bit more dense even. So it's not just dry. Because the reason you're making that dense right there is because when you add the water to the water reservoir, if it's not dense, it's just gonna wash that shit away and then there's gonna be nothing there. And there won't be any way for the water to absorb into the soil block. So definitely pack it dense, but give it a little bit of water too, just to get it prepared, and more muddy and
Rebind it.
yeah, so it holds together.
And that's great advice. I will say they do come with like a shower cap. It's not necessary. I've tried mulch on the top, whether it's just like rice hulls or other types of mulch. But I do think that the plastic shower cap, or even if you just cut up like a garbage bag and tape it on, um, it
I
does
gotta
seem
I
to
gotta
wick
bring up
better.
Jeremy to get a build a soil. He's got this cool shower caps now, dude, that have double zippers down the middle.
That's
So you
dope.
can actually put two plants in there and still have a zipper on each side and have it completely closed. And then if you wanted to do a top dress, you just open the zipper, peel it back. You can do your top dress, put it back together, and zip it up.
I'm gonna have to do that because I've been taping shower caps up out of old garbage bags and stuff. So that sounds like a much better system. But yeah, the SIPs, they work really well. Jeremy from Build a Soil has been showing them for years. This is more of like the city picker shape, kind of more of a square SIP with the fill tube in the corner there. But
Yep.
they've got juniors. Somebody grew autos. One of my buddies, one of the listeners, grew autos in the Earthbox juniors, which are more like this size here, and they crushed it. That was the best grow they ever had. And they're like, "Oh my God, these Earthboxes absolutely crush!" Like, so happy with them. So, um, city pickers are admittedly bigger, like they wouldn't fit in my tent, but an Earthbox does. So just knowing the sizes and shapes in advance is a good thing.
It
These are
just
the
there's
different.
something about there that makes me think that I don't know, the plant has just more water available to whatever it is. It makes it grow like a plant that in a pot that's, in a pot that should be like twice the size to get that kind of a plant. That was the biggest, like my first grow with a sub-irrigated plant. It was like this plant is like twice as big as it should be in the size of a pot, as far as the amount of media that I put into it.
Yeah, I had a couple of people messaging me asking if I was faking my plant images in my tent because it was so filled. I was like, no, dude, I'm not even that technically proficient. Like, I wish I could. Now, probably with AI, I might be able to, but people are pretty good at spotting out the AI stuff. And yeah, it just was so much bigger and healthier than all my other harvests in that tent previously that it's like, well, it makes sense, I guess. It does a great job. And here's just a couple of the different mixes you can use: cocoa, peat moss, perlite, vermiculite, pine bark. Um, it's kind of interesting just looking at a non-cannabis grow article and kind of the things that they're talking about. Here's a variety of mix. So they're talking about like the amount of drainage being perlite versus pine bark, and then the retention being the peat moss, and then they're using coir for only 10%, vermiculite for only 5%. So this is a SIP sample recipe, and kind of cool. That's for peppers, but peppers are pretty close to cannabis, so I would
But then they
absolutely
use a
think that
plant.
it would
Oh,
grow.
they use a what is that? Some kind of squash or zucchini that's covered in PM, and they use that as a picture. What are they doing?
Yeah, that's not the best representation there for sure. I think that they used a bunch of photos from across the web. Admittedly, I think that I do believe that I've seen their YouTube channel, this Albo Pepper, and they do a pretty good job in their actual own personal garden. But as you see, there's like a lot of different stuff. But yeah, I think it's just fun to maybe go through a little bit more in deep detail to kind of show the people a little bit kind of how it works and not just what we're doing, but maybe why we're doing it. And definitely got to shout out Build a Soil and Jeremy because they do an incredible job. I've showed in the past your garden. I've showed uh, Cheddar Bob's and many others who have been absolutely killing it with them. There was somebody over in Mass, I think. I can't remember the exact name of the account, but I've seen some people grow freaking monsters. Like the Earth Box is capable of outgrowing my tent by a long shot, which is a good place to be, in my opinion. Like it fits, the base fits, so like that ensures that I can fill out my entire space. And like at that point, I'm like trimming it back. So um, if you want a really good yield out of soil, in fact, Eagle Garden or Eagle Gardens one, he did a side by side, and he's been a cocoa grower for years. And he had Smiley's Garden hook him up with Earthbox, and in the side by side, he actually yielded more in his organic than his own, you know, years and years of growing in cocoa, his old methods. So, and he even said the flavor was a little bit better, and so he was very impressed by. I think that the setup and prep and all the other stuff maybe is why he didn't end up sticking with it. But it was cool to see that somebody was open-minded enough to, like we talked about earlier, do a little bit of a side by side. I think he was doing like the Jilly Bean at the time or something, something orange maybe.
It's a good
Uh,
one. You know, and another one too we can't forget about is autopots. That's another real popular SIP container. I don't know if you've ever used an autopot before, but I've had a little bit of a couple runs with them. I liked them. They seem to leave it wetter than I liked, so I had to I put hydrogen pellets in the bottom like inch of my pots, and that elevated the soil block up a little bit, and they still wick the water from below. And it just seemed like every time I walked over and tried to pick up the pots, they were like heavy as fuck always. And so, but I still got good, good results on them. They're still everything was growing fine on them.
They definitely work, and I think that they can work for organic or cocoa. But I think Doc said the thing that he doesn't like is that they kind of build up a pretty heavy top layer if you're in cocoa. The EC, when they dry out, tends to create like a crunchiness on the top. So you want to go through and top water every now and again just to even it out. But this is just one of their four pot systems with like a reservoir, but they've got a whole bunch of different options available. So Autopot is definitely another good option out there. Shout out to them. And I think that even VivoSun is starting to make like um, a kind of like a self-contained grow unit that you basically like put a plant in there and it can just like grow itself kind of thing. And they're using a similar system to the Autopot where it's like a wick underneath the pot that you fill a little base with water and it wicks up from below it. So see if I can find that. But it's cool to see more and more people being inventive with the different technologies and trying to implement them at low prices and affordabilities.
Yeah, I saw that too. In my, of course, my initial impression I saw, at least one I saw, was it was a box. You threw it in the box and it took care of everything. You just had to keep throwing these nutrient pods in there or something. And I was like, what the fuck am I gonna do with that? You know?
Oh yeah, it's like $600 too. I think I might have seen it on MyGrow, and it is you're saying it's like a almost like a hard shell box. I'll do a little share screen here. Let
But
me
then I
pull up
saw
this
like their
thing.
commercial for it, and it was like really designed for people who don't have any space, like somebody in New York City in a tiny fucking apartment, but it still gives you a space to, grow a little bit of your own smoke. I'm like, okay, now I understand. It's not designed for me. So,
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of going back to the early days of the podcast. Our host had a buddy, um, Green Goddess Supply, and they had a grow chamber. It was a little more expensive, but it was like a wooden, it almost looked like a cabinet. It was like a stealth grow chamber. And admittedly, I think the light is at this point a little bit outdated, and I don't even know if they still sell it. But this is the V-Grow Smart Box from VivoSun that we were just talking about earlier. So it's kind of cool. Like Spartan said, it's more of like a you live in the city and you just want to grow maybe one or two plants. Maybe it's just one plant, but they're calling it an all-in-one ecosystem. It's got the Samsung LM301H LED, which I've admittedly going back, never been a huge fan of fans in my grow light because that's a point of failure oftentimes, at least with the old school ones it was. I haven't heard as bad of a reputation about these modern ones, but just the fact that there's a fan mounted to the light makes me a little bit concerned about its longevity. Um, that being said, I've had great experiences with Vivosun, both the products lasting a long time and being high quality, and their customer service is actually pretty top notch. So I'm not sponsored, but this is the same brand as the tent that I grow in. And like I said, it's just cool to see. It is $600, so I think it'd be much better if you are really into the growing side of things to set yourself up with a tent and a light than to try and maybe rely on a chamber. But like if you're just ultra busy or you've only got so much space and you're not a huge consumer, this is probably a adequate solution for a lot of people out there. And as much as we talk about the cheap home grow, I think accessibility needs to be pushed as much about like I run my own business. I know I'm busy. That's part of the reason that I haven't gotten my grow back up and running. I'm about to be traveling a little bit to do some work with my wife's company, and so I'm not home as much as I once was, and so that makes growing definitely more difficult, especially when you're working usually, 7 days a week, 70 to 80 hours a week. And making that time for the grow becomes more difficult, especially when you get behind on other stuff. And thankfully, I've been getting caught up on a lot of other stuff. And the grows are around the corner, which I always tend to say, but hey, you can always say tomorrow, tomorrow. But I will say there's been, as much as I miss growing, and I do. Um, there has been a little bit of a nice hiatus just to the first time in several years that I haven't had plants actively growing and having to worry about, keeping this alive, that alive, or who's going to take care of it on vacation, or, but at the same time, I don't have the lovely harvest. I've been admittedly getting a little picky about some of the smoke that I've been having come around my way. And if I'm going to be picky about my smoke, then I got to start growing it myself again. So I still do have some of my stuff from past harvests, but it's one of those things where uh, if you want something done well, do it yourself. And I gotta take my own advice there because that's actually why I got into growing and will continue to grow. Is I'm fucking picky when it comes to cannabis, especially. I hate harsh, but I like to smoke bongs, and if it makes me cough out of control excessively, it's just not enjoyable to use.
Well, to add to it too, and the thing too that always puts a smile on my face, I guess, before I spark up something I grew myself is not only something done right, like nothing crazy's been sprayed on it, for example. But if you want something unique that you're not going to get at the dispensary, you're not going to find that on the shelf, and you're not going to find it that fresh either. And because a lot of people will sit here and say how they have some nicely cured weed or whatever like that, but I'm telling you, I smoke it fresh, man. 9 out of 10 times I've smoked that shit fresh because why? Because I love it. I love it fresh.
It's better fresh, like every fruit and vegetable and everything else for the most part.
Yep. Yep. I'm with you, man. I'm with you. So you get fresh weed, you get your hand-picked weed, shit you picked out yourself. Maybe you pheno hunted it, whatever. You kept it for a reason, and you grew it yourself. So you know exactly from seed to harvest to smoke what the hell, if anything, was sprayed on it or anything to be worried about. And that has to make you smile.
Absolutely, and that's actually one of the reasons I've never been opposed to like um, hunting. People that want to hunt their own game meat because nobody's giving, antibiotics or corn or whatever to this. It might sneak into a cornfield and eat some corn here and there, whether it's a deer or a turkey or whatever. But it lived its
And
natural
you
life.
can't sit there and be okay and bring your kid with you to harvest some fruits or go harvest some vegetables, but it's somehow not okay to harvest some meat. So I'm sorry. If it's a food and you're harvesting it, you're harvesting it. In fact, I have more respect for you if you know where your meat came from instead of just buying it from a quote unquote factory farm and not even part of it, but still participating in it. I'm not saying judging or any of that because I love meat and I'll eat the shit out of it. But I'm just saying I've got mad respect for you if you're out there grabbing it yourself.
Whether it's fishing or hunting, I think being
Yeah.
able to harvest wild game is it's part of a great American pastime, I would say, but also just culturally, historically. that's part of life. That's part of living in
Tell me, if you be
society.
walking out and you found some like fucking landrace, you're in the middle of the woods or some bullshit, and it opens up into a clearing, and there's some landrace fucking cannabis growing there. You're not gonna grab a fucking nug or two and fucking harvest that shit and enjoy it and not feel one bit bad about it. What the hell? How is it different?
No, I agree. And some people don't feel that way. There's a lot of you're from Michigan, I'm from Ohio. There's a lot more hunters, I think, there than maybe some of the bigger city states or just like coastal states. And even then, like I'm in California, there's actually a lot of hunters in California. There's a lot of hunters in the East Coast too. So it just depends where you're from. But I love that people have the option to do it. And it's, typically it's just a very small percentage of what they're going to eat throughout the year. Like other than like the case of deer, where it's a large enough animal that it can feed them for most of the year. But with like cannabis, like a crop, it can get you through maybe a few weeks or a few months. And having it fresh and having another cycle coming up is having that control. What you really hit on that touched base with me is like even in the legal market here, I was naive to believe that everything that would hit the market would be passing testing for molds, pesticides, mildews, etc. I see recalls every single day. Follow the Department of Cannabis Control, DCC, on it might be called the Bureau of Cannabis Control. They flip-flop the name back and forth, I swear. Maybe my memory is just not as good as I like to think, and I know it's not good. But whatever it is, the blank blank of cannabis control in California. If you follow them on Instagram, they'll say like product recall notice, and then like it'll have like dot 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 under, so you can like flip through, and it'll be like X brand for pesticides, X brand for heavy metals, X brand for molds, X brand for pesticides, and it's like, holy shit, it's like big name brands. And we talked about this on the show maybe 2, 3 months ago. We went through that article that like covered the legal market, and like I think it was like 100 plus of the things that they tested on the legal market were failing for pesticides, and almost all of them from pretty major brands. So nobody's gonna not spray on it like you, you know. And not to say that there aren't people in the legal market that are doing it the right way. There are. There's definitely some doing it the right way. But you can't guarantee it unless you watched that plant your whole life. You know, like you're able to with growing it yourself. And that I think is one of the underlying things that is going to motivate me to grow forever because I love smoking as much as I like to try and vape or do edibles or tinctures or RSO, and I love all those things. I will never go without a bong. And unless like the doctors or I physically can't like breathe, I just like smoking bong bowls so much that if you have good, clean, quality buds, there's not a big problem. If you keep the bong pretty clean, not a problem. But if you're smoking stuff that maybe is just not grown the best, it's going to be harsh and make you cough your lungs out.
It's got some Eagle 20 on it. That's a systemic pesticide that the grower that you got it from you can trust, and they didn't spray Eagle 20 on it. But guess what? The guy they got the clone from sprayed Eagle 20 on it, and that was fucking 4 harvests ago. But guess what? The half-life of Eagle 20 is like forever, and
Yeah, that happened to Sub.
it's still in there. And yeah, so it's not even we're not even saying nefarious, like people trying to do it. It's still like people unknowingly are still consuming, unclean cannabis.
Because that's a really tough one to, you have to be pretty solid into the botanical sciences to understand the fact that like something they sprayed on this plant years ago can still be in there, like, and still make me fail a test. And like Subcool's case, it might have been maybe he got it from somebody who was actively spraying it, but like he didn't know and he didn't spray it and he grew it out, vegged it out, flowered it out, and then because he was in a legal market, it did pop for testing, and he's like, well, fuck. So I think in that case they did have to destroy it because it was such a nasty. I think it was Eagle 20 Michael butanol, and like I said, hydrogen cyanide. It will literally kill. There's a certain ppm. I think it's like 1,000. Not super high. So if you smoke enough of Eagle 20 bud, you can just straight up die from it. Not from the cannabis, from the pesticide.
Yeah, and that's scary as shit.
And they used to have this stuff called paraquat. And
Yep.
I've talked about this on the show in the past,
Did
but
it on
in
purpose.
Mexico, they were
Just
spraying whole every outdoor farm that they could come across. They would, instead of going and chopping it down, they'd spray poisonous pesticides that would like be known to blind people, cause all sorts of ailments, kill people. Like people died from consuming cannabis laced with paraquat. So
and do
it's
you think
a
the people that were growing that cared. They still harvested it. They still shipped it up.
Exactly. It's nobody's gonna, you know, in some cases it is nefarious. They just want to make money and they don't give a shit. It could be the Fenty, it could be other drugs in there. They don't care. Whatever will make it sell. I hear that
Not if
the
you grow at home in your SIP container.
exactly. Keep that sip charging. And keeping on the Super Bowl topic from earlier, I know you mentioned Donnie Burger as a strain that you like before bed, and I also that's going to be in my Super Bowl. But what would you mix it with if you were like, man, I got to get a good night's sleep tonight. I've got some event tomorrow morning that I really need to be awake and alert for, so I want a good night's sleep. I need to get to bed in the next half an hour. What a Super Bowl of weed are you making there, Spartan?
Oh, Mac one and Donnie Burger. That would destroy me. Oh my gosh. And that
I
would
mean, it's
all I'd need.
cherry pie Donnie Burger for me.
Oh, cherry pie. That's a good pick too.
Tao, where are you at with the sleep cannabis Super
Dude.
Bowl?
One year when I grew outside, I had a seed from Montgomery to Wright, Canada, and there was one. It was labeled White Widow by Hash Plant, and I grew that thing out. And I tell you what, man, if I smoked a joint of it, I there was no way I was going to stay awake. It was unbelievable. Now, some other kid I knew, he would get all jacked up on the shit like it was freaking caffeine. It was unreal. The kid was like
All
the
right,
anti.
so this
He was
is
like
great. I'm glad
anti.
you brought it up.
And I was just like, dude, I don't know how you can like. And when I had that weed, I was like, I don't understand how anyone could have insomnia because it's just like for me, it was just like I couldn't stay awake. It was fucking unreal. The shit was crazy.
I've
But
got
one
people
other
in my
thing
that life
before
are the same way.
caffeine, we were talking about coffee before. Now, if I really want to crash, I'll do some edible or RSO and I'll be out. And then when I wake up, if you want to wake up fresh and like that, maybe not. But then you just drink a bunch of coffee and I'm ready to go and take on the day. So that's my yeah, that's what I would go for a good night's sleep and whatnot. So
I'm with you on that, dude. I love edibles for the best for sleep. I would say that's maybe the very best would be an edible, especially RSO. And then if you wake up with because you had too much or whatever, and you wake up with a little bit of a RSO hangover, caffeine is the best to get you out of that, and then you just feel amazing
You
on
got
that.
all the pain relief and inflammation reduction from the RSO, and you're alert and happy and picked up.
But I've got all kinds of people in my life do exactly what Tao explains. I'll have the opposite effect of with them, or and so I was reading an article and they were saying that there's some kind of a link between people that have like taken I don't know if it's taken the medication or just had the disease of ADHD, but they tend to be I forget the name of it. There's a medical term where it is a reverse reaction. And so it's like almost a medical thing that happens not only with cannabis but with medication.
Like
So that
atypical response.
so yeah, so I wonder if the people that are opposite like that also have in the past or been diagnosed with ADHD.
It's like you could give someone with ADHD. My mom had it, and back in the day, it was like methamphetamine salts or whatever, like Ritalin. Like that's what it was like in the parentheses. It said like methylated salt or whatever, but it was like basically like meth salt. And for most people, that'd string them the fuck out and make them wired. But somebody who has the ADHD neurochemistry, it actually calmed them down to make them focus. So it is really interesting that not just endocannabinoid systems, but other systems within the body are so pivotal into, how it impacts each individual.
yeah, I don't know if he was diagnosed with ADHD, but I could see that being a possibility for sure in that person that I was talking about. Yeah.
That is interesting because I know like Matthew Gates, I think will say like he can drink a cup of coffee before he goes to bed, and I'm like notably pretty caffeine intolerant. But as I've started to drink more, just like weed, if you use more of it, you kind of get used to it. And as I'm becoming a little bit of a espresso junkie lately, um, I've learned that like, if you have them back to back days, it's not going to have the same effect. Or if you use the same blend or things like that. Do you guys have any coffee preferences? I know I'm like getting into that. The little place I go to's got all these little cards that say like where it's from. Like this particular one was Colombian from the Julia region or Hula. I don't know, I'm probably mispronouncing it, but yeah, pink bourbon, semi-washed. But are you? I know Tao's a coffee guy. What's your brand or style? How do you like
Well,
to?
if I had my way, I'd be drinking Kona coffee all day long, but I don't have it like that. So I enjoy Dunkin' Donuts. Now, I could easily go to Starbucks. It's not an issue, but I don't like the Starbucks coffee. Um, but
And
I
you're a
like
coffee guy. You drink like the a regular tall cup of coffee.
yeah, I drink a pot of coffee in the morning every morning, pretty much. And
Is it like Folgers or?
no, I get Dunkin' Donuts, and you get it from
Oh yeah, like
from
the.
actual literally Dunkin' Donuts. Otherwise, if you get it in the supermarket, it's junk. And probably, Dunkin' Donuts is not the best coffee in the world, but it's something that I like and I can deal with. But when you were talking about, I had shit that was labeled Guatemalan from Guatemala, and I don't know, but that was really, really good coffee. I had it in California somewhere, and I'll try like all different shit. Like Peter's coffee is pretty good. I've there's a couple other brands that are like not crazy expensive and enjoyable, but like yeah, I don't know what it is with Starbucks, but it's just like seems bitter to me.
It's over roasted. So like
Yeah, it's
how
either
Big
over
Tobacco,
roasted or
they take like five
something, in
years of
my
crops,
opinion.
and Big Tobacco they'll take like 5 years of harvest, and then they blend it all together so that people can't taste the difference from one season to the next. So
Right,
their Marlboro Reds or whatever always taste like Marlboro Red because it's 5 years of crops blended, and so it's
right.
so consistent. But
But yeah, when
with
you guys were talking about fresh weed, they cure tobacco for at least a year, right?
yeah, well, in that
I
case, like
mean,
I
it's
said, like
different
five.
too.
And they're also
Right,
not going for like the highest quality. Like if you wanted the highest quality, I'm
right,
sure you could harvest fresh tobacco and it would be much better. But what they're doing is consistency. Like I was just gonna kind of shit on Starbucks a little bit for the thing that I don't like. Some would call it over roasted. I think they just like straight up burn their shit. And this might make me a coffee snob or whatever, but I'm just picky. But like it tastes like licking a fucking bonfire wood log that has been burnt for like 6 hours. It's just like so roasted. And I'm like, and this is only in referring to the espresso that I had from them. Espresso's notoriously, I guess, a little bit harder to make. And so if you mess up, you make it too fast or too slow, or too hot or with too much pressure, like talking about barometric pressure, they fucking measure the bars and all that shit. And it can really impact the flavor a lot. But where it's from matters. And like even the type, like I noticed the one, the Colombian varieties actually tend to have a little bit more. I asked them like which one's higher in caffeine, and they're like they're all pretty uniform in caffeine like levels, and so it's almost like cannabis. Like there must be an entourage effect. There's other shit within the espresso that's like one gave me 10 hours of energy, and then the very next day the other one was like 8 or 9, and the other one was 5. So interesting to learn that a little bit about myself and getting more into the coffee side of things. And before you go, Spartan, are you a coffee guy at all?
No, I like the smell of coffee. That's about all I can say that I like about coffee.
So is your daily pick me up just cannabis,
Well,
or I know you're a tea guy. I see you drink tea a lot.
yes, I like tea. I like tea, and I like in the morning I like some kind of an energy drink. It used to be Monster until I saw that all the Monster flavors I liked, except for I can still drink a white canned Monster, which I believe is Ultra something. But they had all the artificial dyes and crap in it.
oh
So
yeah,
I
they got
started
crazy
shopping.
shit.
Yeah, so I just started shopping at Aldi, which they are a European company. And so they have a lot of the stuff that's no artificial flavors, no all that bullshit. And they have it's a exact knockoff of the monsters, but without the bullshit in it. And they're great. So I've been drinking those. I wish I
Nice.
had one in front of me. It's called like Gridlock or something like that, or Gridiron.
Nice. I do like Aldi. I think they have some of the best prices. Here in San Diego, they've actually been rated like the best priced grocery store for a couple years. And I think they're related to Trader Joe's, which I'm also a big fan of, but I think they're like sister stores. And those are like the top two grocery stores in the US. And there's a guy called Fat Electrician who does these historic videos. He has one, his side channel is called Fat Files, and he did one on like Aldi and Costco and a few other grocery stores. And it's real good detail if you're ever interested in looking more into that kind of stuff. But Spartan, it is that time. Do you guys have Michigan Bros Grow Show going on tonight? I know it's a Super Bowl, so maybe not.
Yeah, we do. I think they're going to start it a little later. I think it was scheduled at like in about an hour to start. So I
All
could hang
good.
it for sure.
Well, especially I
One
was
thing
gonna say,
I
especially
haven't
because we
really
lost
explored
Tao,
yet.
but now he's back. He just disappeared on my screen. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna let Spartan go, and then it's just gonna be Jack. I'm like, I'm gonna wrap it up 15 minutes early.
I don't know what happened, but yeah, it just went in and out on me.
Zoom does that to me sometimes. Like literally, the whole program will just shut, and then it'll like buffer, and then like pop back open. I'm like, I don't know why it does that, but it hasn't happened in a long time. I've been better about updating it recently, and I just restarted my computer. That's why we were a few minutes late on the start tonight. So sorry for y'all. That I know Seed Person One was anxiously waiting because he got in there with like the first three messages. So shout out to you, Seed Person One, who's still here with us 2 hours deep, not giving a
Oh,
shit about the
sucks,
Super
man.
Bowl or maybe watching it in the background.
Yeah. The Chiefs got 23 yards in the first half. That doesn't sound great.
That sounds bad. I think my wife said they're down by like 20 something. So
Ooh,
my whole
doesn't sound
NFL
good.
is rigged conspiracy theory might not be true because I was saying like from before the season started, Travis Kelce's going to propose Super
Oh,
Bowl
I didn't even have
to
an
Taylor Swift.
opinion on the Super Bowl this year. It's like, I don't even have a horse in the game this one. I don't really know who I like, and now I know who to hate, and that's the Chiefs. So cool. All right, I'm happy now. My
There you
team's
go.
winning.
Fly Eagles fly.
I love that. I love that. And they're green and white too. Those are my colors.
It's like
Oh,
Spartan, yeah.
yeah, I'm going to say Eagles, man. I want the Eagles. I'm an Eagles on this one. I hope
And
I
Well,
there's
don't
never
lose
been a
that much.
three-peat in
you
Super
got
Bowl history, so
you got a good shot at it now. They have 24-0 for those who aren't paying attention. Eagles are up.
and getting back on the caffeinated side of things, 'cause I do think it does tie in well with they're
Hell
both like
yeah.
it's a leafy vegetative plant that you can get an effect off of, right? So like teas are similar to cannabis in that they're flavored and have some sort of effect from them, and they're cultivated and have a long history and maybe have medicinal effects to them. I think the Chinese historically have kind of looked at it as a strong medicine in some cases. What kind of teas do you prefer over there, Spartan?
A lot of them, whatever ones taste good to me, I'll make my own. I'll go out and grab spearmint and throw it. I've done like little reels on this where I'll take spearmint and just throw them in a mason jar and maybe throw some lemon balm in there or something. And then just take my little kettle with boiling water and pour boiling water into that mason jar and screw it closed and basically just let it takes like hours, but just let it sit out there until like out in the sun or whatever until it's not hot anymore so you can actually pour it out. And then just like take the little lid off the mason jar and keep the collar and put some uh what's that cloth called?
Like cheesecloth or
Cheesecloth,
strained
yeah.
cloth?
Put some cheesecloth over it and screw the collar back on, and then you can just pour the liquid out. And then you can put that in the pitcher, put it in your refrigerator if you like it cold. Sometimes the hot teas are really good, right hot. I like to taste them both ways. So I'll usually pour some off and put it in the fridge and at least have a glass of the hot tea and see what it tastes like. And if I like it a lot hot, I'll know, next time let's keep it all hot. But that's probably my favorite. I mean, it's the most satisfying when you can just walk out in your backyard and harvest some shit fresh and make a fresh
To eat
tea.
or drink. That's like billionaire shit,
Yeah.
man. Like I see Chamath Palihapitiya on this one podcast, All In. Like you'll see him in like his house in Italy, and then like his chef picking stuff from the garden to make into a thing. And it's like you don't have to be ultra rich to do it. Adam Carolla just had a pretty funny bit. It was like 5 or 6 minutes at this dry bar comedy where think it's all clean, like no swear words or whatever. And his bit was like rich people versus like poor people, and like just like things that they had in common. And that was like kind of not saying that like you're poor if you have a garden or something like that, but he was saying like like
Oh,
never
that's true.
flown on a commercial airline. Like rich guy, poor guy. Like they both have that in common. And there was just like a bunch of different examples like that. But that's kind of like it made me think of that kind of example. It's like you don't have to be rich to have the garden that you can go harvest fresh produce from and eat it that night. Like that's not only like the best tasting, but it's also one of the healthiest things for you. If you look at the nutritional content from any plant, anyone cannabis, like if you look at like the terpene levels, and as soon as you harvest it, it's on a steady decline. It just goes down. If you steam it, if you cook it, like you're cooking out nutrients. Like raw stuff is so healthy. Like I was raw vegan for a couple months, and not to say that it's like the only style to live, but like man, some of
Wait,
that
I got a
shit makes you
question.
feel amazing.
I was thinking about this the other day. Where do the nutrients freaking go? They go up in the steam. How does it? What is? Where do they go?
Yeah, the boiling. So it's just the boiling point of those not maybe not nutrients. I don't know about nutrients, but they might go up with
You're
this.
degrading.
But
It's
definitely
it's
like
almost
all
like
the terpenes
oxidating.
and all of those things, they have boiling points. Just like, cannabinoids, they all have boiling
So
points.
if
So
you
they're
inhale the
turned into vapor.
steam, you'll get vitamins in your
Oh yeah.
lungs.
If you could
Now
catch
we're
them.
talking. Now we're talking. Yeah.
But
Sal's gonna
that's
be
why I
huffing
like when
his
I do
steamed
my
broth
Breathing.
tea.
I'm gonna quit eating. Just start breathing. Yeah.
That's why I'm doing the tea in the mason jar. That's the whole idea behind that because it's sealed, right? And so when you wait for it to get cool enough for you to grab it and not burn the shit out of yourself, it's cool enough for that to condensate back into the tea. So you're getting everything.
That's like the
That's
old
what
Jamaican remedies. Like a
That's
lot
why
of
you'll
that stuff was
see,
just
yeah, you'll
like,
see old teacups. I don't know if you see people make the teacups that maybe they're made out of clay or whatever like that, but they'll make a top for them that sits on the cup itself. And the reason for that is you don't want to lose everything to the steam. So you're trying to catch it to recondensate on that and drip back down into the cup.
that's smart. Not even just the heat being lost out of the top. Like we wear a hat in the winter to cover our head. Like I just shaved my head a bit, and I noticed here in California where it's not even that cold. I'm much colder with like an inch or two less hair. Um,
Yeah.
and so having a sealed pot in ceramic or whatever, like versus like a paper cup, going back to like the coffee thing, if you pour it into like a ceramic mug or a ceramic cup versus like that paper to go cup, it just like keeps the heat so much longer and like it makes the smell like radiate better out of the coffee. Same with tea. It's just like the experience. I thought I never liked tea because when I grew up in Ohio, like I don't know if there's a great tea community, but like my family wasn't big in tea, so like we'd have like Lipton or Arizona iced tea, which like they're commercial, they're
Sugar
big,
water.
sugar water, and it's been sitting for, it's not fresh by any account. And then like my sister-in-law is from China, and she makes some hot tea, and it's like uncomparable to like any of the stuff that I ever had out of a plastic bottle or a can. So, and obviously comparing apples to oranges there. And sometimes it's like not even like a tea, like Matthew gets real technical to say like, oh, it's a tisane if you're talking about like the spearmint and the other stuff because it's technically not a tea leaf, but you're, steaming it or whatever. They call those tisanes, but there's like certain I think it has to be a certain type of leaf. Like there's like white teas or whatever. Like specific ones are cool tea. Me, I think I'd
Well, I'm
consider
just
them
talking in
all
growing terms. It's like, what do we do when you put water and a plant together? That's a tea.
right. Yeah, it could be a compost tea.
Exactly, exactly.
You're not gonna want to drink that one though.
That's why I
Your
call
plants will.
soup. That's why I call soup, like chicken soup or whatever. I'm making compost tea for me.
That's funny. I mean, it's true. And on the opposite end of like things being cooked off, when you make a kind of slow and low soup, a lot of stuff cooks into that stock, and it drains, some of the flavor and nutritional content out of the vegetables or whatever it is that you're uh, kind of cooking down or meats.
Yeah, into that broth. So if you're feeling sick and you can't stomach a lot, you can at least drink that broth and get the high nutrition that you've just kind of drawn out of the stuff that you've been steeping in that warm water.
One of the reasons I think chicken noodle soup is so popular when people are sick, even if you can't eat the noodles or the veggies and stuff, you just sip on it. You're getting a lot of that protein and other stuff that I think the sodium, oftentimes we're so dehydrated because it's just hard to stay hydrated when you're sick.
Too, especially if you get it out of a can. Oh my God, it's got so much sodium.
I remember like when they started making these little, you could like pop them in the microwave and it had like a lip sipper. It was almost like a coffee, but it was like Campbell's soup with like a mouth lid. And I don't know if they still do that anymore, but I remember them for a little while. And it's just like that's definitely an experience, literally like slurping your soup up like out of a, I think it might even
I
been
remember
plastic.
having those for lunches for sure. I took it into work before and drank out of those. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? I look like I got a sippy cup. What am I doing right here?
And you'd like slurp a noodle and like a little chunk of chicken, or like they actually had it there, so it wasn't super effective. And I could see probably why it didn't stick around or become ultra popular. So the good old thermos. I think I saw a funny video about like Stanley. I think like they're the one that made like the recent little one with the handle and then it tapers down so it fits in the cup holder. But I think they've been making thermoses for like a real long time. They were the one that did the old school thermos that everybody knows from like your lunchbox from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
The
Just like
big
your
metal
typical.
green one is the
Yep.
fucking bomb. That thing is badass. You can put your soup in there. You pour your soup out. That's the lid, the top screws off, and that's your bowl. And you screw into and you pour into that, and it keeps your shit hot for half the fucking day, and it's still piping hot. Yeah, that's the ticket right there, man. That's when they were making shit that worked good. That brings me
Yeah, you
back
described it perfectly.
back
Like
to my factory days.
And you can appreciate that because you're at a few hours, and then when you get that hot meal and it's still hot, like especially if you like brought something like a sandwich in or something like, and it just didn't work out on other days as well. To have a nice hot meal is a one of those great things,
Yeah, it warms you up from the inside, man. It helps.
especially where you're at in the wintertime. Oh man,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember hot chocolate too, hot cocoa. Man, nothing better in the winter
Hot
than a hot
chocolate,
cocoa.
hot cider. Oh, both of those things are really
Oh,
good.
I
Hot
gotta
cider
say, Starbucks hot chocolate is really was really good the last time I had it. So we give Starbucks some kudos on the hot chocolate. That salt caramel hot chocolate. Yeah, man, that's the jam.
I'll have to try it out. I don't think I've come across a hot chocolate that I haven't liked, and I've had like high school concession stand hot chocolate.
Some of
Yeah,
it's
it's
too
got to come.
weak.
It has to come in a fucking styrofoam fucking cup with a lid with the sippy cup on it, that little hole you poke down in. And it's got to be so piping hot that you can only just barely take like a milliliter. A milliliter, it's all you can drink without burning the living shit out of yourself. But you still sip it, and it's just fucking, oh, it's amazing.
Until and the roof of your mouth being toasted.
Yeah, I was on the hot cocoa for a while, kick, and I put two. You know, the Swiss Miss. Like you're saying, all hot cocoa is pretty damn good, but the cheesy Swiss Miss, I put two in one cup, man. Stir that shit to be thick. That shit's legit too. I just love the.
That'd be thick.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
You
now I
weren't playing
want one. You
games.
He's got like
guys,
the towels pouring out. I can see him like this, just pouring it into his mouth, and it looks like Hershey syrup,
like resin,
you know,
like
the last
Slush.
drink.
resin.
He finishes it, and there's just like a trail of like undissolved cocoa powder still sitting
It's
in
the powder
the
at
mug.
the bottom. No, I would never go that far. But yeah, dude,
Oh man.
it's got to be so bad. Anything that tastes that good has got to be bad for you. So
Yeah,
Especially since they
I
could
need to
sit in a
find
pouch for years, and then you
right.
just throw it in some hot water. It's
my buddy Baked Pone goes
fucking
off
instant.
about hot chocolate, and his favorite is the Speedway gas station right now. So Speedway gas station's doing it
Sheets.
right, I guess.
I'm gonna have to scope out
I don't know if you
something
guys
in the
have.
coming week.
I love the good stations. I was in Florida, and they had the Wawa, which I think is like I think Sheets in Ohio, man. Sheets is like 24 hours. You could get like anything from like a breakfast sandwich to a pretzel and cheese and like and like the door kind of thing. They walk up and gotta love a good gas station food. Admittedly,
Jack, we're losing you, man. You keep
Yeah,
talking.
you're in and out. But
anyway,
now that
I'll
I'm
pass it
in,
to Spartan for final thoughts
What?
and shoutouts.
Oh,
it's already
yeah, just
late. Look
much
at that.
love, everyone. This was a fun, fun episode. We just kind of shot the shit, and yeah, go Eagles, man. Keep, much love and keep growing, everybody.
Cheers, Spartan. Thank you so much. And last and certainly not least of our panelists is the American one.
As always, Jack, thanks for hosting. Shout out to everyone in chat. I wasn't as I should have been in there more. Sorry, everyone. But yeah, it's always good seeing everybody here. And God, I was going to say something. But yeah, all right, everyone, have a great week, and we'll catch you. If not somewhere in between, we'll catch you next Sunday. Peace out.
Cheers, Tao. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone's having a good Super Bowl Sunday. We'll catch you all next week. I'm at Jack Greenstock, as you all know. Jack_Greenstock on X, where this is going to be posted tomorrow. And if you didn't catch the Super Bowl, you can maybe check out the Puppy Bowl because that's a fun one to watch too. It's they're tied, Team Rough versus Team whatever Gruff or whatever it is. They're like 5 wins and 5 wins. So this is the year they're going to break the dead heat at the Puppy Bowl. So check that out. And peace and love, everybody. Sorry about my connection issues there. I'll try and get that straightened out for next week. Cheers, y'all.